Welcome into another edition of The Pilgrimage Perspective. What's the subject? Well, it's the pilgrimage that goes beyond other pilgrimages. It's beyond Assisi. We're talking with the leaders, Father Joe Schwab and Sister Joanne Schatzline, about their experiences and what they find special about this very unique trip to Rome, Assisi, and the surrounding areas in the Franciscan order. There are places that most people don't go. In fact, they even say that tourists really aren't around because most people don't know about it. We learned about places around Rome and Assisi that are unique not only to the Franciscans, but to the Catholic faith as well. They'll talk about that and much more. Oh, they'll also say the first place that they are going to visit as soon as Italy opens back up post-pandemic. All of that and much more coming up right now on episode 6 of The Pilgrimage Perspective.
And welcome into episode 5 of The Pilgrimage Perspective. I'm the host, Andy Trado. Alongside me today are two awesome leaders that we have. We have Sister Joanne Schatzline and Father Joe Schwab. So in thinking about this pilgrimage, I go back to my 2 times going on pilgrimage to Rome and Assisi. And I remember at the end of in the recap meeting to talk about what we experienced, I know a lot of people have said, well, this can't be it. There's got to be more to this. You know, we want more. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, well, you can go beyond Assisi, which is what we're talking about today. We're talking about the Beyond Assisi pilgrimage, and you'll know why it's called Beyond Assisi. So we're going to start from the top. And actually, we're going to start with Sister Joanne with a little bit of history about how this pilgrimage came to be. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome, Andy. I can't take credit for any of the conception of this program. The credit really belongs to Murray Bodo and Andre Serino. And you have to know Andre Serino. He has a mind for innovative, new, creative programs. And that has been true all through his life and continues to this day. But back in probably 2012 or 2011 or 2012, those two were sitting at a table somewhere in Assisi. And they took a napkin and started jotting down ideas of what do we do to answer the question of what you said, Andy, just now, is if people have been on an ordinary Franciscan pilgrimage, whether it's been the Assisi program or the study program, or then they come back on their own, but they understand that, well, you can see an awful lot, to do it with somebody that can lead you to those places and break them open for you. We spoil them in Franciscan pilgrimage programs with that process. Mm-hmm. So Andre thought about what are other places related to people in the Franciscan family that we could put into a pilgrimage program. And it was real easy to come up with the title, Beyond Assisi. And so they started thinking about places related to particular saints. And the people that were to be included were to be that next generation. And that was a significant point of this, that there's a next generation of Franciscan saints and blesseds, plus a couple of places that we simply don't get to that are woven into the Francis and Clare's story. And so they started putting this together, and quite early on, they knew that they wanted to engage a woman. We try to do that with all our pilgrimages, to bring a woman on. And of course, at that point, I think I was the senior woman leader at the time, but I think both of them had worked with me. And so I was so humbled to be invited to join them to think about this planning session. They had worked out quite a bit. They'd even gotten as far as contacting the places that we would go, because we have to have those connections. Mm-hmm. And none of them were going to be able to be done through the office, because this is completely new territory. Mm-hmm. So we worked together then, and the first program that we led, called Beyond Assisi, took place in 2013. And the places included several women saints, several men saints, and some blesseds. And I was just looking through, because Joe and I have been part of an adaptation of what is possible, what didn't work, all of that over the last few years. but we went to places like Celano to see the birthplace of Thomas of Celano and focus on what ordinary study pilgrimages do go to Tagliacozzo,
Mhm.
but they haven't broken open the theology of Thomas. So we
Wow.
focused on that kind of perspective in the place of his birth. We went to places in Rome, Araceli, that's a Franciscan place, and that's got a huge place in the history of the friars. And it's not far from St. Bonaventure on the Palatine, and finding out something about Leonard of Portmorris and Bonaventure, Barcelona. So always working a new place. And then we did Bagnoregio. And in the beginning, that was really an extensive full day experience. And then over the course of time, if you watch Rick Steves' anything
Right.
on TV, thanks to Rick Steves, floods of people have been going to Bagnoregio and making it difficult for the terrain because the city, the Civitas, as they call it, is on a spindle type thing, and the only access is this very narrow bridge. And with the multiple people now coming to see it because it might disappear, that's even more precarious. So that's impacted this. And then we did Anagni, where the 4 popes were from, all of whom had a place in the lives of Francis and Clare. And that's kind of one of our favorite places to go. I mean, just getting into the history of the papacy. We do it a little bit, but not like we break it open at Anagni, right in the birthplace of 4 popes. And then we saw a couple of hermitages that people had never been to. In the beginning, we went to Bellegra. It's called the Nido di Santi, isn't that right, Joe?
Yeah.
The nest of saints, and the number of saints and blesseds that come from that particular hermitage were what we wanted to touch into. And these were ordinary people, ordinary friars. These were not the intelligentsia of the order. These were common ordinary friars. And then we started out in Gubbio. Everybody wants to go to Gubbio,
Right.
and we really make that's a tricky visit.
Yeah.
Stories, that's a tricky visit.
Yeah, I know that
never
in
know.
talking with some
Yeah.
of our pilgrims, some pilgrimages go, some do not. But
Yeah.
I've seen that in the last couple of years, we've kind of
Yeah.
shifted that the leaders will try and get there because of the importance of the story.
Yes,
And it is just such a fascinating place to go.
it
So
is.
that might have been a kind of a spearhead to transition it into make it a part of the traditional pilgrimage.
That's right. And there's a couple of places there that figure into it. That there's the Abbey on the way, where Francis would have stopped after he had stripped before the bishop and
Right.
really was he struck out outside of Assisi to go. And these stories are so human that happen that we break open. And then Gubbio itself, and I got to say, the friars at the Church of St. Francis in Gubbio have been some of the most hospitable people to welcome us there and to adventure. It's not an easy place just because of parking
Right.
and if the weather's bad, there's no place to hide, and
Right.
we've frozen to death nearly there. But that just gives you an overview of who this is. And a little bit later in the conversation, I'd like to come back to this notion of what was the original concept that led to Beyond Assisi.
Mhm.
But I think over the years, our motivation has morphed a little bit, and I'd like to touch on that.
Yeah. No, of course.
But I don't want to take up all the time.
No, no, not at all. One of the questions I did have, and I'll ask you this to you,
Mhm.
Father, is that do you find that people who go on this pilgrimage go to learn about everything? Like, are they going in fresh? Are they going in, well, we did, Assisi 1 through 4, or 1, 2, 3, or 4, I should say. Are they going in with this previous knowledge, or is this all kind of new to them?
It's an interesting combination of people, really. We've had many people that have been on an Assisi 1 or 2 kind of program, a basic one. And we've also had people that have never been to Europe at all, much less Assisi. So, and the people who are new at it look at it with new eyes, and they get excited about, oh, now I would like to go on a basic Assisi program. And the people who've been to the basic Assisi program say, oh, now I get how the Franciscan movement really expanded and became a worldwide kind of phenomenon, rather than, isn't this a nice special little program that happened in this quaint little Italian hill town, you know?
Mhm.
So
Sure.
people are coming from both perspectives, and they enrich each other, and they enrich us as leaders, honestly.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I was always under the assumption that it was always in one direction, obviously going through the traditional pilgrimage and then going to that. But going the other way is almost more interesting, because you're learning about the things that really not a whole lot of people know. And then you jump into the self-immersion of Francis and Clare and Assisi and parts of Rome. So that's an
That's right,
interesting path that they take. And I didn't even think about that.
Andy. And co-relative to that is the reality that Joanne and I spend a lot of time with them on how the Franciscan movement flowered and grew and expanded through the laity. There's quite a bit about the nuns and the friars, but there's also a lot about the laity in this program that's really not available in time-wise with a standard Assisi program.
Right.
So as I've told them almost every time I've worked on it, one of the reasons you're here on this pilgrimage is that the Franciscan movement did not stay in Assisi. It went out. And that's why it's affecting you from these other countries today. So this is an experience of getting in touch with your roots as people who have been touched by the Franciscan movement. Here's how it flourished, it grew, it expanded. And it's just a great program and a great experience for people. We get really positive reviews from folks, whether they're first time in Europe or many times and been to Assisi before, it doesn't matter. They love it.
Right. I think that's the cool thing as well, is that it brings, like you said, it brings in both groups of people. It brings in fresh eyes and it brings in seasoned veterans. And I also like that you sort of give them a little slice of the traditional. I mean, you can't do a pilgrimage to Italy without going to Assisi and Rome, obviously, for many reasons. But you do have the immersive experience in allowing them to do what they are, having a day for themselves in Assisi. Not that you can do Assisi in a day, but if they know where they're going, they probably will go back to where they loved. And then if it's, again, fresh eyes, they are able to kind of walk around and do, the things you do when you're only there for a short amount of time.
Right.
But,
and we take them up to the city. Actually, there's typically a mid to late afternoon time and then another whole day. And we'll take them up there on the city bus and point out the main places. And honestly, even doing that, they're getting more time than the great majority of visitors to Assisi. It's amazing, but it's true. Most people are there 2 to 4 hours.
I think that's what's crazy to me, is that in obviously, like you mentioned, Joanne, is that, Rick Steves, I watched the special on Assisi, and it was maybe, 25 minutes. And I thought, he missed all the good stuff.
Yeah, he did.
And I mean, again, I'm lucky to be able to go there twice, but there's just so many. I mean, he missed the Rocca Maggiore. He missed the Basilica of St. Clair. I mean, there are so many things that are missed, and like maybe people are only doing the things that he mentioned. The 2 to 4 hours, the extremely abbreviated tour. So yeah, the immersion of being in the city, it's a special thing, no matter how many times you go.
Yeah, it's the difference between a tour and a pilgrimage. He
Yes.
did a tour. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
I'd just like to piggyback a little bit on what Joe is saying. Once Joe and I started, it was maybe 3 or 4 years, maybe after the second or third. Did you come on the third one? I think we did, Joe, in training.
Yes.
I think so. In the beginning, it was really important to Murray and Andre that we communicate to people that we were not doing a pilgrimage to Assisi, that this was for those that had made a pilgrimage, and our preference was that people had made that Assisi pilgrimage. And, there were always exceptions. There were always exceptions because, first of all, you want to get a good enough size group of people to make it worth the pilgrimage office supporting that pilgrimage and letting it go. But I think over the time, and as Joe and I started to work together a little bit more clearly, we realized that we simply had to make some kind of an adaptation, that people, even if they had been to Assisi, it probably was going to be 15 years ago
Mhm.
for some of them, and they wanted to revisit, and you have to let them revisit. And I respect Rick Steves a lot, and I think we struggle with it ourselves. How much can you possibly put into a 25-minute segment? For us, it's how much can you put into a 9-day pilgrimage?
Right.
Those are the things you have to take. But I think it's as Joe said, it's the breaking open of those places from a different perspective than tourist, that it is pilgrimage. And so we see ourselves really making that Assisi time a significant time. It's certainly a very small part of the time on the road, but they look up at it. We usually stay down in the valley because the buses can better access the group down in the valley, but they're looking up every night, and there is a bus that goes, but the last bus comes back down in the valley by about 10:30, quarter to 11, and you miss that bus, you're stuck.
Yeah.
And that isn't really enough time. Plus, it's a strenuous pilgrimage. I think initially that was a learning for me, because I thought, gee, we're going to spend most of the time on the bus, and so people can recoup on the bus.
Right.
But some of these places that we're going, I didn't even include Todi or Monte Ripido. They're not easily accessible, and if the bus can only take you so far, they're strenuous. So by the time we would get home, people really needed to rest.
Mhm.
And to enjoy a meal, because we often picnic on the road. And
Right.
so you didn't want to cut into that time. But Joe made a good segue for what I wanted to bring up.
Yeah,
And
of
this is
course.
becoming even more important to us as I envision it. And I think it was maybe our first time together, Joe, where I really started to advertise this program for those who are picking up the mantle of leading in our organizations, like hospital systems and education systems, who had already gone on a leadership pilgrimage to Assisi, but they never learned the rest of the story, the next part of the story. And because of what Joe said, these are lay leaders. And it also expands your knowledge of the arts in the Franciscan family to include Jacoponi da Todi, or to get into some of the other issues or storytelling, the whole drama that plays out in Spoleto as Francis comes to sell the cloth, and that drama of the interchange between the bishops and Francis and the papacy, the history of the church through the popes that impacted. But I'm becoming more and more convinced, and it's partly because I'm going to be doing something for Darlene Prides. She really has written a new book. I think she talked about it during one of our recent pilgrimage staff meetings, and she is really unearthing even more laymen and women. And I just read her Hidden Presence, I think, or I forget the title of her book, but I just read about that it convinces me of two things. One of all, that we don't know this group of laity for all the reasons. They're not well documented. They're living lay lives. They weren't historians to keep track of the things that they did. But the second reason is that we never took them seriously or had an opportunity to enter into them. And so her work has led Joe and I to even revise further to include somebody like Lady Jacoba di Setta Sole. But it's telling me that there are gifts and talents that the lay people bring in and of their lay work, whether it's being a parent, being a spouse, being a common ordinary worker. And what she's exposing just recently is how these people did what they did, and how they intuitively broke open another dimension of the Franciscan family. So that, I think for me, this pilgrimage isn't just about going beyond Assisi. It's entering into an intimate part of our original history that at least in the United States, the tradition is being handed on to
Right.
the laity in leadership positions, in
Right.
ministry positions. And that became a rationale for encouraging them to come on a second pilgrimage if we could get them to do it. Now,
Sure.
post-COVID, I don't know if we could.
No, I think that's fascinating that you mentioned that, because a lot of people think the original traditional pilgrimage, it's the end of the book. And really, it's just the beginning of the next chapter, which is fascinating to listen to it. And doing research for our talk today,
Mhm.
there are so many things that I didn't know, and I work with this every day. It's awesome that there is an option like this for
Yeah.
people that talk about people who have the Franciscan spirit in the lay part of the church. So this is something that is it's so many different people. For some pilgrimages, it's very one dimension. It's you fit into this group, it's going to go well. But there are so many different people that should be interested in this pilgrimage, because it talks to so many different people. And it's beyond Assisi, but like you said, it's almost the beginning of the next chapter, and it's giving people the next thing to look forward to. So I
Andy,
think that
if I
makes it
could,
special.
yeah, I wanted to mention, as Joanne said, there are really some significant people in here, and often these are not priests. So, for example, Brother Elias, who for most Franciscans was given a black paint job for a long time. He's some terrible person, and we have learned quite a bit more about him. And yeah, at times he was pretty darn tough. Yeah, at times. Other times he was really insightful and much more of a strategic thinker than we've ever given him credit for. And now we're able to explore the church he built for St. Francis in Cortona, which we couldn't do years ago. That's available to us now. That church is like a book once you learn how to read it. Jacopone that Joanne mentioned, Crazy Jim, if you will, this incredible poet, but also the person, he couldn't really get along with people too well. He was always getting in fights about all kinds of things. Okay, Brother Giles, this companion of Francis, he was a farmer. We go visit a place where he was, as Joanne pointed out, Monte Ripido. We go to Monteluco, this hermitage outside of Spoleto. There's a letter there from Michelangelo saying, I left my heart in Monteluco. Isn't that beautiful?
The forest.
It's too bad he didn't think of a song for it like Tony Bennett did. But hey.
But that predates Roman times.
It does.
In that forest, and it's the sacred woods.
Yeah, it was a pagan sacred woods site originally. We go to Narni, one of these isolated little hermitages that became so important in the Franciscan movement. Joanne mentioned the abbey outside of Gubbio, San Verecondo. We really didn't know where it was for a long time. Now we know this is the place, and there are partial remains of the medieval structure there from Francis's time. These are amazing spots, and I'll just say in Foligno, for example, St. Angela of Foligno, and then St. Margaret of Cortona. You talk about two almost wild women of the Franciscan movement. These are really interesting people. We can unpack all of that on this pilgrimage. There is absolutely no way to do this on a standard Assisi pilgrimage.
No.
But isn't this fascinating to get to know these people and the places, and how the places still tell us about the people? It's really, I think, a lot of fun, and I'm glad I can work on it.
Yeah, it really. I laugh to myself when I think about the experiences that we've had where things don't go as we should.
Oh yes.
They don't go as we should, and yet somehow, because this is such a human experience. It's the experience of human beings. Yes, Bonaventure was one of the great theologians of all time, but there was a human dimension to him. Angelo Foligno, oh my goodness, yeah, talk about drama revisited. And you get to break open their stories. but there's this other dimension of the struggles that these men and women had to live out their vocational call, whether it was to remain married or it was to segregate themselves and dedicate themselves to the healing. Margaret of Cortona, she's got healthcare as part of her ministry. And then of course, Angelina of Montegiovri with education. They're out there trying to do social services. And it really, it helps to focus on the tension that has always been between the clergy and the lay, and what roles do you play? And frankly, the women in our church are indicated, we are registered in the Catholic Church among the laity. We do not take solemn vows, we take simple vows, not to get into that. But I always remind even the sisters that are coming on this pilgrimage that this is our life story, because we've walked that tension between wanting to live in relationship with time dedicated to the presence of prayer and God, and at the same time taking that prayer into society, either by healing ministry, hospital services, education services, distributing to the poor of resources and all of that kind of thing. There's always been that tension between how do you do that and then come home at night and pray.
Right, Joanne, you remember that one of the great places for us in Foligno was the Chiostro Verde at the Monastery of Santa Anna. This is a painted cloister in green tones, but it represents, this images represent a mural, the life of Christ. But until you really start looking at it, you don't realize all the principal figures other than Jesus are female. And it was done for a community of women that really had started with public ministry in the 13th century, and they got pushed out of it, mainly by social mores that spilled over into church. The friars didn't want them to do it either. All the social stuff, it's not what women should do in medieval Italy. That happened, they really got pushed out of it. And we can unpack that with people, and also how these women for centuries were cloistered, but never forgot that that's not how they started.
That's right.
And these are really impactful stories. It's not written in letters, but it's written in the frescoes in this cloister. Fascinating stuff, and it's not open to the general public.
I think that's fascinating. You both have mentioned one of the special things about pilgrimage that probably should be marketed a little bit more, especially as time goes on, is that you see yourself in saints and in the blessed. To me, that is something that I was not expecting on the pilgrimages I've been on. And it's sort of talked about amongst the younger high school kids, because they were similar in age to Francis and Claire, but it sounds like it continues on this pilgrimage as well. People go through so many different things in their lives, and you can almost find a scenario that you have gone through with someone that you cover on pilgrimage, and you hit that relation, and it means so much because of the places you go. And that's a special thing. And hearing that this is the same way, it's great. And that's something I hope people are able to take away from it. One thing, as we sort of get closer to close, I do ask questions of the leaders, and it's because of everything going on in the pandemic. First question is, I'll start with Joanne, is,
excuse me,
if somebody came up to you and was interested in this pilgrimage, and you had to convince them as to why they should go, what would you say?
I would say, and I guess it is, I sell it every time I'm talking to somebody. If you would like to have an experience that gets you into the lives of people that you're not as familiar with, and learn from their spirituality, which is so directed to the human side of all of our spirituality, And if you would like to experience the hermitages in a new and different way, in this time when our world is such a runaway train, then this pilgrimage is for you, because we have bus time. We take you to places with prayer time. We do all the things that we do on an ordinary pilgrimage. We focus on the place, the event, but the spirituality, and hopefully give them enough time to really experience the place and then process. And, my favorite end question for everything I do: so what? What is different? What difference is this experience then going to make for you when you go back home? What do you learn from the lives of these people that you haven't heard of? Then this pilgrimage is the one you want to be on.
That's a great answer. Joe, I'm sorry, I have to ask the same question, so follow up to that.
No problem. I always tell people this pilgrimage is about why you're related to Franciscans at all. Why should you care? Well, this is primarily developed by lay people. It's got a lot of the relationship between the laity and the religious. And how did we come together to form a worldwide movement? Well, that's all based in this pilgrimage. This is how it got started. This is why you care today. So if you want to care for tomorrow, you should know why you care for today. And you should have enough foundational material to build a house, if you will, of meaning upon those foundations. We can give you those foundations in this pilgrimage. It's an amazing experience too, in that you go to many places which have very few tourists, or virtually none in some conditions, some situations. So this is not a pilgrimage in which you are going to be overwhelmed with hordes of people from other countries with cameras and so on, taking pictures and talking and using all the bathrooms and everything else that are so common in crowded areas of pilgrims and tourists. This is not that kind of a pilgrimage. It's a really different experience, and one that really invites you to reflect, to ponder, to meditate, and to absorb, so that you bring something with you into the future. That's the so what. Out of this experience, what will you learn? But also, more importantly, what will you feel in your heart that will help lead you into a future spiritual life?
Those are two really good answers, I would say. You have me convinced, I would say, to go.
I hope you do come.
Come on, join us next
And we
time.
can encourage you that the food is just as good in all these places.
Oh, I
The
have no
wine
doubt
is
about that.
sometimes even better in some of these places.
Oh,
And
okay.
there's always gelato.
Oh, okay. Well, you have me sold, because three things are right there. That's what I go there for.
Sempre c'è gelati.
One question I have left is, again, a personal question. And because we're obviously doing this, depending on when people are watching, this is being filmed during, hopefully, the end of the pandemic, at least closer into the United States. Hopefully for our friends in Italy, it's not that far away either. So we'll fast forward to when the pandemic is done and we can all celebrate. Let's say you are just getting off the plane in Rome and you are able to go any place at in Rome or Assisi. I think usually people say Assisi, but if Rome is the place too, what is the place, and what is the one place you will go, you could go straight away? Father, I'll start with you.
Thank you.
And it can be a sanctuary, it can be a little coffee shop, it can be for a glass of wine, if you have a favorite place of that. I've had answers all over the board. So
In Rome or Assisi, is that where you're focused, Andy?
yeah, usually people say Assisi, but if your place is in Rome, that's okay too.
Yeah. For me, it would be in Assisi area. And I really would like them to start with being at the place where we stay in the area, which is the Domus Pacis, to be connected to the Porziuncula, because as we know from our story, our history, that is the place from which the order expanded out into the rest of the world.
Mhm.
And so that's largely what this pilgrimage is about, is how we expand it out. So let's start here and get our bearings, get calmed down, get over some jet lag, get refreshed. We're starting a whole program of renewal here, and we're being sent out. And it is from that little chapel that Francis engaged the friars in the concept of mission. Our mission was to get out of the area, even out of Assisi, and get out into the world. That was the place where it began. And so I think it's a perfect place to begin this pilgrimage.
I think you hit it right on the head. If I can expound upon that, every time I'm there, I don't want to say I don't feel like I'm worthy of going in, but it's just such this, it's so amazing. As I walk towards it, you kind of, this calm always comes across me. And as soon as I get into the doorway, it's a feeling I can't necessarily describe, but I think a lot of people probably, if they've been there, probably have had the same feeling. And I'm lucky that I have a video of it. I was granted permission of getting it. And anytime I need any kind of calming presence, I watch that because it's like you're walking in. And it's a very powerful place.
And Andy, we usually stay now in a family hotel right across the street, Hotel Antonelli. And the family really likes us. It's really obvious. And so it's right across from the Domus Pacis and the Porziuncola. Yeah.
So, sister, I pose the question to you: what's the one place you would like to go if you could, post-pandemic?
I need to get back to the tombs. There's something about the tomb of Francis that has always been powerful for me, and the tomb of Clare, and the tomb of Peter. So, I mean, that's 3 places, but for some reason, I need to reconnect down there. There's rituals that I've created for myself when I go. It doesn't matter if I've been to the tomb of St. Francis on October 4th, which is a battle to even get at. I mean, I honestly can recall being under the armpit of a couple of people as we were making our way to get down to the stairs that lead to the tomb. And it took a half hour from getting in the entrance to down to the tomb. And then it's packed.
Sure.
But I found a chair. I always find a place to sit because they're moving. And I sit, and it never disturbs me unless somebody's really being raucous, but they keep you quiet down there. I never am at a loss for inspiration, either in the quiet of that tomb where it's just me talking to Francis, talking to God, supported by his 4 companions and Lady Jacoba. Whether it's that or watching these pilgrims and their children walk down that aisle and point to Francis. And we always say that's Francis pointing to God. But what are they telling their children about that experience? And so I imagine all that's going on with these people that waited as long as I did to get down to that tomb. And it's equally true. It's less crowded at Clare's tomb, but that's the first place I go when I'm in Rome. I have to go to the tomb of Peter, the Blessed Sacrament Chapel, just to settle into this journey that's going to be different than any other pilgrimage I've ever led. It's going to be different because the people are different. Right. Or if it's in Assisi, I have to visit those tombs.
I think that's a great answer as well. Kind of the start of both, and both your places. It's definitely a very powerful places and places that people always remember. I know that I definitely will. But that is a great way to close. Thank you both for your time today. We've been talking about Beyond Assisi. I'll put the link up as I'm talking right now. If you would like more information, they get on the website is a wonderful day by day sample itinerary. I can't necessarily say it's going to be the exact one, but it's crafted from both of your hard work. And again, it made me want to go, because you get to see it's almost a behind the scenes different experience. So thank you both today for your time. Again, this is the Pilgrimage Perspective, episode 5. We've been talking about Beyond Assisi. For Sister Joanne and Father Joe, I'm Andy Trado. Thanks for tuning in.